Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is April 11th, 2024, and you're listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we are talking about Ethan Mollick's recent book, Co-Intelligence. We have Beth, Carl, Andy, and Brian. And we wanted to give it a little bit of time. This book actually came out, Tuesday of last week, I think, or something like that. So it's been just over a week since it came out. We wanted to give a little time just in case some folks in our audience wanted to read it and then have a discussion about it. One thing we definitely don't want to do is just rehash the book. I think it'd be more fun to have a conversation about the stuff in the book and why maybe we personally on this call or on this show think it's important. But before we get all into that, I think we're going to kick it over to Andy because it'd be good to just have maybe a quick recap, Andy, if you would, on who Ethan Mollick is. I mean, we certainly reference him a lot on this show, but I'll be the first to say I don't think I knew who he was 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. I think, Beth, you were the first person that introduced me to him through his posts on Twitter. So, Andy, you want to get us kind of caught up here?
Yeah, going back to that period in time, 6 to 9 months ago, when really a lot of the focus of those of us who have been working on trying to get the best out of AI with the rapidly emerging tools, we were all focused on prompting, which is an art. There's an art to it, and we've made comments on this show about how over time it'll get easier and easier as the AI gets better and better. But there's some people who are really masters at the process of eliciting the very best content generation and or analysis from the major frontier models. And Ethan Mollick, who's a professor at Wharton, at the business school at Wharton, is in the vanguard, if you will, of publishing on X and elsewhere what he does with the models and with his students. And so he became an exemplar and published a lot of interesting things about how he was using prompts. And so, Beth, I think you did introduce his stream, if you will, to us. And so he's become, in my mind anyway, a leading expert in the implementation of AI, particularly an area of interest of mine, which is in the context of training and learning. And how do you use that with students? What are the implications for the future of education and so on? So he's a major thought leader. So it's really important, I think, therefore, to cast him that way, because we're all learning in this process, and right. This is an instructor of how best to use this, who's humble and extremely knowledgeable. He's published, along with his wife, a whole library of prompts, for example, which is just skimming the surface of what he's doing in his academic research. And he's becoming acknowledged, I think, in the world of academia as a leading spokesperson for AI.
Also, not just prompts, but also research studies, and also not just us, not just Andy's mind or our mind. Actually, the OpenAI and other leading AI companies have tapped him to come in and talk to them about prompting. As he reveals in the book, that was sort of a surprise for him, but that has been the role that he's played. And it turns out that through a variety of characteristics, he's really good at it. And so is his wife. And so that sort of led, he's an academic, he's had a whole career, he's a game designer. There's lots of things in it that go into it. But that was part of his avenue in, and he's a professor, so he's so good at explaining things, right? I mean, it's just a pleasure to listen to.
I think it's interesting that I just want to say real quick that, AI is interesting. We're finding people, not just Ethan Mollick, but certainly him, but these people are kind of coming out of the woodwork and finding and landing in AI. And what I find is really cool is they're applying their minds, their knowledge, their wealth of experience up to this point. and finding out how that weaves into AI and what the future would be. Whether you're listening to somebody like Mark Cuban, who's a billionaire and is saying what AI is going to do in the next 5 years, 10 years will drastically look different than anything we've had in the last 20, or you're listening to somebody who's more academic like Ethan. I find it really, really fascinating as we find these people and they're willing to share their ideas, which, kudos to them, because it does take time to post your ideas, especially with Elon. I'm going to do it again. Elon.
Ethan.
I corrected myself and went the wrong way. I like that.
Know who you are. Yeah, I 100% know who you are.
Man, I did that the other day too. I didn't think I was going to do it today. Ethan Mollick.
Professor Mollick.
There you go. That would be better. Professor Mollick. It takes time to put out posts. I mean, anybody that's put a simple post on LinkedIn with just your thoughts knows that it takes time to write that. Ethan Mollick is not only doing that, and of course it's not just him, but he's putting out published research papers. He has his newsletter called One Useful Thing, which is excellent. You can sign up for that for free. In fact, the one he just put out maybe 2 days ago is sort of a follow-up to the book, not like a follow-up, but talking about some of the things that have changed or happened since, he finally pressed send and sent it to the publisher on the book, because of course it's AI, so things are moving quickly. So yeah, I'm just really, really impressed by him and many others like him. Carly, you were about to say something as well.
Oh, the reason why I enjoy his work, especially on X, is that on X, for those, like, I think a lot of us go on there for the breaking news, but there's a lot of, like, that's where the hype really happens. You have what's called the AI bros there that are saying everything, trying to hype the latest tools, trying to hype like who's going to get canned in the industry, who's going to, the RIP of whatever. So I think like whenever I read his stuff there, it's very objective. And it, like, there is, of course you'll have opinion, but it's not like ridiculous clickbait opinion. It's more of like, here's what I found when I did this research. And that's why I think he will continue getting those previews from all these different AI vendors, especially the big ones. It's like, I've had Claude 2.1 for the past 2 months or past month. I've tried it and this is what I found. And it's good here and it's bad here. And this is what I compare it to. So I look forward to, and it's very like objective, where you see others, it's like, Claude just killed ChatGPT because of, I was like, here's the thread. Oh, don't forget to follow me, right? So I like that. And then it's reverberated in the book, and also on LinkedIn. So it has that academic, like research-based component to it, yet he understands where this is going. And it's just, I was like, you kind of wish a lot more people were like that on X versus.
I'll summarize that by saying his posts and his publishing is content rich and clickbait empty.
Yes,
it's true.
Yeah. Which kind of makes it clickbait to me, because I love that. I love diving into the data and stuff like that,
Right. And one more thing, just we'll let him introduce himself from his One Useful Thing Substack, from his, I am a professor at Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. I study entrepreneurship, innovation, and AI. And I, Ethan, am trying to understand what our new AI haunted era means for work and education. So that's why he's relevant and why we're talking about him today.
Yeah, he's endlessly curious. Like, I think like all of us on this show, not to put us in the same academic room as him, but we're all endlessly curious. That's what drew me to want to start this show. That's what drew us all into the AI exchange months and months and months ago. Is just being curious about, what is this? Where is it going? What is it going to mean? How does it affect my job? How does it affect everybody's job? So I think Elon, just sort of transitioning to the book. And,
Ethan.
The book is.
Elon.
Did I do it again?
Yes.
Oh my God. I'm just going to stop saying his name.
Excellent.
He who can't be mentioned wrote this book, Go Intelligence. Man, that's so stuck in my head. Ethan and kind of getting into some of the things. Now, again, we don't want to, I want everybody who's listening to the show to be encouraged after the show. I hope you're super encouraged. You just go out and get the book, whether it's Audible or you're just going to buy the book or whatever. I consider it to be a fast read. I don't consider myself some wonder reader or anything like that. I sat down with it one afternoon and finished it that night. It's about 200 pages long. I found it to be easy read. You're not going to have to like circle back and be like, wait, hold on. What deep thing is he talking about that I have to go? It's just so well written that it's easy to consume. Also, I will say, if you really haven't dipped your toe into AI, of course you're listening to the show, so you have. But if you just sort of need a refresh, if you need a restart on, wait a minute, where did this come from? How do we get to where we are? Where are we going? With some really insightful thoughts. I think the book also does a really good job there. One of the things I wanted to start with is he has 4 principles. And those 4 principles are: always invite AI to the table. I'm paraphrasing. Be the human in the loop, which we talk about quite a lot. Treat AI like a person. And the 4th one is, we hear also a lot, which is assume this is the worst that it'll ever be. So I thought maybe we could just, not take too much of the show, but kind of dive into these a little bit. Number 1 there, always invite AI to the table. In the book, he talks about how he feels like everybody has to have 3 sleepless nights or 2 sleepless nights. I forget what it is that he says.
3.
In there. 3. And sort of, you need to have those moments. And he says his wife as well, like, laying in bed and staring at the ceiling and going, wait, if that's true, and then your brain goes off and then you're like, forget about it.
What the heck just happened? What did I just experience?
Yeah, your brain's having mini explosions or whatever. So one of the things he says is having those sleepless nights, and also always invite AI to the table. And I would paraphrase it, but I'd love to get your opinion on it, is start with AI. I talk to my clients a lot about this too, with what we do with sales, which is just, if we can get sales reps at this point to start thinking, oh, I'm going to try that in ChatGPT first. And then if it fails, I'll go somewhere else. Beth, you were just saying something before the show about saying the same thing with Perplexity. I will try in Perplexity first. And if it fails, I will move on to tool 2, 3, 4, 5. So what's your guys, any other thoughts or takes on that first principle before we move on?
I think, as an experienced AI person, I'm on the show, I kind of live this all day. It was a good reminder to sort of, to a certain extent, think like a child, approach it from a beginner's mind, and start with the AI, right? So what I am often starting with is, okay, so what is the most effective prompting strategy to use with the problem that I have just conceived in my head? And so I'm not starting with the AI. I'm starting with trying to figure out what I think about something. But start with the AI. And you guys have heard me before. One of my favorite things when I have a particular kind of idea is to just open up the iOS app and say, and turn on the voice interaction and say, I have an idea, ask me questions. And that is an example of start with the AI, right? Like, see what can be done.
Love it.
Let me just say about what he's accomplished, that you really don't absorb and incorporate the skills that are necessary to get the best out of AI unless you practice it.
Right.
So he is an example of somebody who, in addition to all of his many responsibilities, has somehow found the time, along with his wife, to really invest hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours now. I mean, remember back to Malcolm Gladwell, you achieve mastery once you've achieved 10,000 hours of practice in whatever you're pursuing. Well, if you're just dabbling with AI and you've accumulated now 3 cumulative hours of working with ChatGPT or what are those other guys? Gemini or Claude. You've gotten a few hours under your belt. Now, as Beth's saying, start to build more hours of interaction with the AI. And that's the platform that will lead you to some things that are really quite remarkable as methodologies to get the best out of AI. So, for example, in the book, he talks about using a council of feedback agents, if you will, to review what he's saying in the book. And he's created multiple of these personas. One of them, I forget what the specifics are, but one of them is a harsh critic, who's going to, really tear it apart. Another one is, really helpful and going to provide me with, embellishments that are going to improve the accessibility of what I just wrote. And so he's interacting with multiple AIs. That's beyond what I do. Chat GPTs, like the custom GPTs that you can get, in the Chat GPT framework, you can build those GPTs and have them standing by at the ready to engage with. And you can now incorporate them, multiple GPTs into the same GPT thread. How was this all developed and discovered? Practice, practice, practice.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing about that example is that he was meeting his own need with that, right? So in part of how he established who and how these personas were going to talk to him about various chapters in the book, he was thinking, what is the best way for me to hear this? So like the super critical guy was like pompous and arrogant, like, my dear Ethan, right? Like, okay, do you, right? Like, tear it apart. I'm going to receive that in a different way. Because, and I know that about myself, so I've suggested that. Just stuff like that was like gold.
I agree. It's a really, really cool way to, bring other people into your council. And by the way, I want to call out Leah, who's done a lot of comments here while we were talking, been part of this conversation. She's put in posts, but a couple of things she's saying is like, look, it's like playing video games. You have to keep playing to get better at it. 100%. And also I'll put this one on here because it's a take on me. Turning it into a drinking game. Every time Brian says that other name, you take a drink. Yeah, you probably could. I'm going to do my best to keep people sober on this show, though, by just avoiding it altogether and letting everybody else do it. But thank you, Leah. I'm reading all your comments, and you have some great observations as we're doing this conversation. So thank you. The second, and we can kind of just run through, generally whatever. The second principle we had is be the human in the loop. We've certainly talked about that a lot in this show, about the idea. I was just putting together a marketing deck and talking about this, where the goal for us, especially at scale, but for a lot of people, is to not automate sales to a point where it no longer needs sales reps, let's say, just as an example. And so what we're really, really pushing for is saying, look, AI can be amazingly helpful, but it does its best work when it's sitting next to you, not in replace of you in your seat. And so just trying to get people to understand that you're going to get really, really good results, but by putting the human in the loop, you're bringing all your years of experience and knowledge to the table, so that you can help shape and mold the types of answers you're getting out of AI. Any other thoughts on, be the human in the loop? It's a big concept. You hear it a lot. Certainly not unique to the book, but certainly important.
Carl, you are muted. Because you were going to say the horrible word, weren't you?
No, I was going to say, I saw an article today, I think in the Financial Times, that Meta and OpenAI, they're all close. I think it's Brian Knight or whoever the COO of OpenAI and whoever the other person from Meta, they're talking about how like their next level of models are going to have, like, they really emphasize the reasoning aspect.
Yep.
I think though that when we talk about human in the loop, right now, all our models, we have to have human in the loop. It'd be insane for us to just let any automation go without actually having someone to review. Even though we've dialed in the prompt, spent hours on it, really tested it, you still need somebody there just in case. You need to put disclaimers on your bots and all those things. I think you'd be very curious to see the higher level of reasoning, what that means, because they were talking today about how that level of reasoning elevates, and now we can understand more complex problems. So I'm curious to see what that means. And maybe the little hints of it were, we've all seen GPT-4 Turbo, where it suddenly was quote unquote majorly improved. And slowly but surely you got like people's like, oh, it's so much better in coding, so much better here. So I'm curious to see what were the guardrails and what were the things that made it lazy, quote unquote, or it just didn't, it was Opus surpassed it, Claude Opus surpassed it, but then now it's better again. So I'm feeling some of these models actually, I'd be very curious to see the unrestrained, like pure out of the box model that you could do with a GPT-4. It'd be curious to see what a pure unconstrained GPT-5 even looks like. So I'm just curious about the reasoning aspect, which I'm really excited about over the next couple months.
That's an interesting idea that Paul Reitzer was talking about like many months ago on at that time, the Marketing AI show. Are the AI companies at an advantage because they're using the unfiltered original products, which we, I mean,
don't
you can ask them to do horrible things, which is why they're not giving them to us. But also, does that put them at an advantage? Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, that's why I think, Andy, you've talked about this, your open source models. And then instead of companies trying to take on the huge costs of training their own models, as we've talked about on this show, they're more and more, they're taking the 500,000 models that are currently available, whatever, and finding the ones that are closest to the solutions that they're looking for, and then tweaking those models and making small adjustments and things like that, which is really interesting. The third one here, and the fourth one will be easy, but the third one is like treat AI like a person. It's a funny part of the book. He talks about how that's sort of a sin because the humanizing of AI could be a problem. The more and more we do that and treat AI, in that sense, even maybe in the physical sense, it could cause problems down the road. Carl, I think you and I were talking on a show one time about like when you start putting faces and emotions and things like this on AI robots, where does that stop? And when do people start going, wait, hold on, I'm not going to ask AI to do this anymore, whatever the task may be. In Ethan's, I looked at the book first. Wait, in Ethan's book, it's so in my head. He talks about more the sense of treating AI like a human, in the sense that it should be conversational. You should not think of it as a tool that was built by humans, but think about it as having a conversation with another human. And I think mostly going towards that idea of natural language, which we've heard over and over and over again. I've certainly seen it. I know you guys have talked about it, that you can kind of code or engineer your way out of a really great response. And that oftentimes the answer with prompting is in fact the most simple. I'm certainly a fan of well-defined and organized prompts using Markdown and stuff, but I have had many situations where I've actually gone backwards to get a better result. And oftentimes that just means, hey, stop for a second here, Brian, think about this. How would you just say this to an intern sitting next to me? And I always love going back. That's not my original idea, but I love the intern analogy, because you could always say, okay, wait, hold on. How would I actually just tell an intelligent intern next to me how to do this? And sometimes that is exactly the way you should say it to the AI. And so that's how I interpreted it from Ethan. But what did you guys, take from that?
So the other reason that it's important, so there are two things. I sort of see this as split, treat it like a person. And on one level, totally remember all the time that it's not, right? Like you're going to get fooled, come back to this place. Like that's the 3 sleepless nights. Like, whoa, no, it's not a person. Mm-hmm. And you're treating it like it's a person because it's been trained on people. It's been trained on what people write, how they write. It's a prediction engine. So when you use motivations that would motivate people, it understands that as a cue to give a better response, right? So like those kinds of things are a big part of why you treat it like a person, I think. Anybody else?
I wanted to, embellish that thought, which is there's this deep reservoir, this sort of endless pool of data of all kinds of different types of humans and character representations in there. So don't treat it like a person, treat it like
Right.
a million persons in there, and you're trying to find the one that's going to give you the best answer. So that's how, assigning a role, which could be as simple as in the case of Ethan Mollick's book, saying, okay, I want you to be a harsh and arrogant, supercilious, critic of whatever I've written. Just those words, whatever words you choose to define the character that you're appealing to emerge from the depths of all of that information, that brings up something that's different each time. If you just change a few words in a prompt to describe what it is that you want, who it is in that sort of, meeting of the minds down there somewhere in the depths, you'll get something different each time. And so talk to multiple persons in there and use prompts to kind of elicit those.
Nice.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's a good point on there. The last one real quick, and then I do want to pivot because so we keep on time, is just the worst it'll ever be. And what I'll say to this is absolutely go listen, read the book, because he does a good job towards the end of the book of breaking down basically 3 scenarios. This is actually the best we'll ever get out of AI, and where is society if that's the case. And by the way, that's not the worst thing in the world. We still have a lot of untapped abilities that people maybe just haven't thought about how to use it. And I think he does a good job of this, as well as others, in saying that the reality is we still don't know what GPT-4 is truly capable of, because perhaps we haven't thought about what that way is to use GPT-4. So while we're all waiting for GPT-5s and beyond, to say that we've somehow exhausted our current models, our current abilities of AI is totally false, which I love that idea of, like, dive in deeper into what you have now. There's still a lot of hidden gems there. Then he has, like, sort of middle of the road, which is that it will continue at a ever increasing pace. And then the third one is sort of this thing is about to kick off. If you thought it had kicked off already, you're not even close. AGI is much, much closer than maybe what's being publicly predicted. And then there's that scenario as well. But we hear this, Matt Wolf, another one that we talk about quite a bit with his YouTube channel. He will often say in the middle of a saying, and guys, I know this isn't a great result. We could certainly talk about Humane's AI pin with this. This is not a great result. By the way, there was a review of that we'll talk about next week. But this is the worst it'll ever be, more than likely. And so, if you can kind of see over the horizon a little bit, you can say, okay, well, if it can do this today, I can see what it's going to be able to do tomorrow. And actually, tomorrow's show on Hyperwrite and what they've done with their on computer agent, essentially, is a great example of that. So we'll definitely talk more about that tomorrow. But any quick ideas on worst it'll ever be?
Yeah. There was so I posted on our little on the show page. There is a video by Andrew, I think, Ng of the AI Fund, right? And he was talking about AI agentic workflows. But if you actually use, like, I think GPT 3.5 and use it as an agent and build it that way, it actually outperforms GPT 4 in a lot of different things. And so I'm still going back.
3.5. GPT 3.5.
Yeah.
You said GPT-5. He doesn't have access. Nobody does.
We don't know that.
All right, some people do, not us.
Maybe
Ethan Mollick probably does.
3.5.
Ethan Mollick probably does. Of the first people I know probably has it is Ethan Mollick. The thing though is I go back to the whole thing of Lumiere's law, where we're still looking at technology through the lens of our tech, like the things that we've used it. So. And if you think of all the use cases right now, like create this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, but still in the lens of, hey, I need you to create content. I need you to do all the things that we currently do. We just try to add it to do it, to make it better or empower. And that's what we always talk about. That's the best use case of AI. But you're right, Brian, are we actually using it to what it could be, right? What are the things that we could use it beyond what it is? And maybe those, you can start seeing a little bits of it when we talk about custom GPTs when you start talking about, you start automating a bunch of things, that you start going above and beyond just like individual tasks. And like, how do you now tap into its advisor insights, or how do you make it review things, then take that review? Like, we haven't explored all those pieces because the progress is so fast that we don't have time. Like, I bet you in the next 10, let's say AI completely stopped today, like there's no more progress. There are so many things with GPT-4 that is unexplored, that people just, if you were giving them time, they could do all sorts of things, but you won't, because in 2 months, we're all going to be talking about a Llama 3, GPT-5, whatever it is, because that thing is just super powered. And then GPT-5 in itself, we could be 20 years of adding all these things, but then, you know, the next level. So it's an interesting concept that we're going through. And this is where I feel a lot of people just get, it's like, I don't have time, because it won't stop. Like Suno came out, UDO came out. Like, what are the, like, one after the other, and just cannibalizing. So it's fascinating, that angle of it, where you're thinking, oh my gosh, we haven't even 3.5. I bet you if we had 10 years, we could probably see all sorts of crazy things, but we won't. There's not enough time. It's like 2 months and we're done.
No, it's absolutely. And I would say that's one of my recommendations for this book, which again is Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. It is sort of an anti-overwhelm book. At least I felt that way. I would be curious to hear from newbies who might be like first exposed to this information. You might need to walk around the block a little bit, take some breaths, and come back. Talk to us. I'm happy to talk with people who are overwhelmed by this. But it is so actionable and so approachable that I think it's really helpful. And Carl, to your point, chapter 7 is AI as a tutor. Right? Like Ethan is an educator, and he's really diving deep into, okay, so what could this be? And one of his ideas is flipping the classroom. And it's totally cool. And if you want to know what that is, go get the book.
Well, I do want to talk about that a little bit, because that is probably one of my favorite parts. But the idea of flipping the classroom, but really what it gets to is that education is going to have to change. And one of the ways that perhaps it might change, and by the way, Ethan says it's not going to be easy, but you can use AI to help with it too, is to turn towards more active learning versus passive learning. And in the general, I'm making this very, very broad, but the general idea, and I do love it, is the idea that, like, okay, I've said this, my daughter's 13, so she's 7th grade, and if it comes to a point, I mean, kind of is now, where she can get quality answers using AI tailored to her learning abilities for a particular topic. I mean, she's in civics right now. Okay. So civics in the US government has not changed terribly much in terms of what she's learning in 7th grade. I'm not talking about recent laws.
Carl laughs in Canadian.
But the foundational fathers, the 3 bodies of government, these things have been there, right? Like, this is not new material. It's just what she's currently learning. And if you imagine a world not too far away where she's able to consume and get very high level training based on her in these ideas, and she can do it at home using AI as a tutor or whatever, then it opens up what can happen in the classroom. If classroom time doesn't have to be used any longer to cover basic knowledge, then maybe perhaps that classroom time can be used for active learning, where it's more hands-on experience. Now, how would you do that in civics? I don't know. Maybe you would play the 3 roles of the government, and you would divide the class up into 3 areas, and you would talk about checks and balances, right, as an example or whatever. But these teachers who are so smart, I am sure, could come up and using AI as well, and he talks about it in the book, come up with new ways to do active learning. Yes. If the pressure was taken off of our teachers to have to cover every single point in the book during classroom hours, which is very, very difficult to do. So I'm like super excited about this. Yes, you should definitely read the book because, like we said, Ethan is as a professor, this is what he does professionally, and so he has a very unique and helpful way of looking at education. But I'm super bullish on this. I cannot imagine education not changing. Now, whether public schools will get there fast, I don't know. I think it's going to drive more people towards private and homeschooling and stuff like that because they're going to realize they have more opportunities to do these kind of things. And so I'm really interested to see the disruption of education as he talks about it in the book. Okay, that part I want to say because I love that part of the book.
So I want to just share what I think is a key insight that's coming from the world of education. And that is, for a long time, and this is from the book, in that particular chapter on AI as a tutor, for a long time, it's been understood that the one-to-many classroom context is not as effective, or it's important to impart a certain amount of knowledge in that context as a group. But if you take an individual out of that group and you do one-on-one personal tutoring with that person, it has a dramatic acceleration of their accomplishment of the subject matter. And yet that's not scalable with our current tools. And the insight is that with AI, with a personal, conversational tutor available to each student, that's learning from that student what works, what doesn't work conversationally, and improving with memory in that exchange, you have the opportunity to scale this up to one-to-one tutoring to a very much larger population than it can currently afford that.
Yeah.
And by the way, Leah here in our comments is in education. She's a grad student in psych. She said, I want to study AI to see if people with ADHD are more creative prompt generators, which I love that idea. I can't wait to hear more about that, Leah. And then also she said, I use AI to generate lesson plans using Common Core standards. You can also integrate the student's classroom organizer to tailor their learning for every, that's capitalized, topic. I love hearing stories about that. I love going on TikTok and other places and hearing these really innovative ways of teachers. What I mostly love is hearing people who are not shutting it out, who are inviting AI in and going, look, it's changed everything. And that's super scary because we've done it a certain way. Education in the States has been a certain way for a long, long time. And, it needs disruption. But I love people like Ethan and so many other thought leaders and just teachers who are just sitting on TikTok going, I do it this way. There was an amazing one. I wish I remember her name. I've lost her over the months. She was like January of last year, 2023, talking about how she was going to use AI for creative writing inside her classroom. And I was just so blown away by her ability to think differently, think outside the box in a public school and say, I choose to do it this way because I think this is the best for my students' growth over time. This is going to be something part of their life. So very, very interesting. Go ahead, Beth.
One more thought. We're talking in this conversation, we've been talking about AI as tutor for school, right? The next chapter is AI as coach, and what works for schools then starts to bleed into how you're training. So most of you may not be teachers, but I assume that most of you, or at least a heavy chunk of you, have needed to train someone to do something as part of your job or as part of theirs. So this affects that too and creates some opportunities that weren't possible before. I'm super excited about it. AI innovation training. I am just there. It's delightful.
And I'll plug a little bit with scale because that is something we're doing at scale and we take really seriously. I take very seriously with sales reps. And one of the things we tell sales leaders all the time, but this is the honest truth, we believe this, is that you can take onboarding from a traditional for a sales rep that would be about 90 days down to 30 days or less using AI solutions. It's absolutely possible. If you have somebody that comes in the door and knows how to sell, And what you're really doing is you've hired them on from maybe a different company where they were being a sales rep or AE or something like that. And they're just pivoting to your product, your service, or whatever. That can typically take 90 days because there's so much back and forth that needs to happen about just getting spun up on the knowledge you need to acquire in order to talk intelligently on a phone call or in an email or whatever. And we're just seeing those numbers come way, 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 way down because you're now to be able to take talented, and intelligent sales reps, sales leaders who can put up training plans with their sales reps. The AEs, the managers are creating training plans. They're using books like this, and they're saying, give me an 8-week training plan based off the main topics of a book, maybe like a really popular sales book, and doing things like that. We're super innovative ways of using it for education. So just wanted to bring that up because it's definitely something I focus on all the time, Beth. So I love that you brought that up. Okay, we are at time here. Look, we could keep talking, honestly, double this time about this book. But what I think we really want to say is, hopefully this has inspired you to go take a listen or read it and go check it out for yourself because there's so much more that we didn't cover. We're going to continue to be following, Ethan Mollick is in terms of, what he's putting out, his wife as well, through his Substack, One Useful Thing. He posts a lot on Twitter, but he also posts, I think, reposts sort of, but also on LinkedIn. So there's many, many places you can find his sharing of knowledge. So we highly encourage you to go do that as well. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yay.
All right, we'll leave it there. Okay, guys, look, tomorrow we are going to be talking about Hyperwrite. We're going to be doing our review. We did some pre-work on that last night, and I got to tell you should come back for that. That's going to be very interesting. There's some cool things that are going on there in terms of agents, and we definitely want to share that. So come on back tomorrow, and until then, we'll see you guys. Bye.
Aloha.